Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Telegram at Breakfast. Hercule Poirot believed firmly, almost spiritually, in the sanctity of a well-ordered morning. It was a philosophy he practiced with the devotion of a monk. Thus, the breakfast table in his London flat was arranged with mathematical precision: egg perfectly soft-boiled, toast cut into identical fingers, a small pot of chocolate steaming softly at precisely the right temperature. The grey November light filtered through sheer curtains, lending the room a faint pearlescent glow that Poirot found both restful and aesthetically pleasing. He had just seated himself, napkin neatly angled, when a knock sounded at the door. Before he could speak, the door opened and Captain Hastings stepped in, cheerful as ever, his face briskly pink from the morning chill. "Good morning, Poirot. I hope I'm not intruding." "You are always intruding, mon ami, but fortunately in a manner I can tolerate," Poirot replied with a faint smile. "Sit, sit. You may witness perfection in the form of breakfast." Hastings barely had time to make a polite remark about the weather when the housekeeper entered with a silver tray, and atop it, a telegram envelope, its edges slightly crumpled as though handled in haste. "A telegram for you, Mr. Poirot." "Just arrived." Poirot raised a dark, elegant brow. A telegram at this hour is rarely good for the digestion. He opened it carefully, avoiding so much as a tear in the paper. Hastings leaned forward, curious. "Bad news?" "Not bad, Hastings." "Intriguing." Poirot read aloud. From Lady Evelyn Whitcombe. "Stop. Urgent matter of grave concern at Winterfell Lodge. Stop. Beg your immediate aid. Stop." When he finished, he tapped the telegram lightly against the table, thinking. Hastings frowned. "Winterfell Lodge, you've mentioned it before, I think." Poirot nodded. "OUI. A grand estate in North Yorkshire. Old money, old pride, and OUI or old secrets. I visited some years ago to advise on a matter of security. The Whitcombes possess a family history full of the little dramas that accompany wealth and isolation." Hastings sat back. "But what could be so urgent?" "That sounds rather dramatic for a winter morning." Poirot's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "It is not the wording, mon ami, but the hurry with which it was sent. When a lady of refinement sends a telegram so abruptly, she is either terrified, or someone wishes her to appear terrified." "You think she's being forced?" Poirot gave a small shrug. "I think nothing yet. But I observe. And what I observe is this: Lady Evelyn Whitcombe is not a woman to yield to hysteria. If she claims there is grave concern, then the concern is indeed grave." Hastings watched Poirot rise, straighten his tie, and place the telegram precisely on the mantelpiece. There was no question of refusing the summons. Poirot had already accepted it in his mind. "And so," Hastings said, smiling slightly, "your quiet day is ruined." Poirot lifted a finger. "Not ruined, Hastings. Redirected. Order and routine are the comforts of life, but the solving of mysteries are, that is the stimulation of the little grey cells. I could no more refuse this call than you could refuse a cricket match on a summer's day." The decision made, Poirot packed with characteristic efficiency. The suitcase was small, the contents immaculately folded. Hastings, who had been invited to accompany him, took far longer and required multiple reminders not to forget his gloves. "Really, Poirot, I don't know why you fuss so much." "I fuss, mon ami, because you do not. Between your absent-mindedness and my perfection, we create an equilibrium." By early afternoon, they were aboard the northbound train rattling steadily away from London. Poirot occupied himself by gazing out at the frost-covered countryside. He found winter landscapes oddly philosophical, bare branches, dormant fields, faint wisps of chimney smoke rising from distant cottages. England in winter was subdued, thoughtful, somewhat melancholic. Hastings, flipping through a newspaper, eventually lowered it. "Do you expect trouble, Poirot?" "I expect something out of place. Something irregular. Lady Evelyn is not given to wild imagination. If she fears that something dreadful will soon occur, as she states, then she is either receiving threats or anticipating them. Perhaps it's a case of burglary. Possibly. But Lady Evelyn does not summon Hercule Poirot for petty thieves. None. She writes with fear, or yes, but also with urgency. And urgency implies proximity. Whatever threatens her, Hastings, is not far away. Hastings shivered slightly, though the carriage was warm. Sounds ominous. Poirot folded his hands. "I do not say it to alarm you. Only to prepare your mind. Fear that is vague often hints at danger that is very specific." Their journey continued through increasingly remote parts of the countryside. The snow thickened, fields turned white, the sky dimmed to a steady dove-grey. By the time they reached the final station, dusk hovered on the edges of the horizon. A motorcar was waiting, sleek, dark, and clearly expensive. The driver, a stiff man in a heavy coat, nodded curtly. "For Mr. Poirot and Captain Hastings?" "Lady Evelyn's orders, sir. Winterfell Lodge is expecting you." The drive to the estate was long and winding. Frost sparkled on hedgerows. The engine hummed in the otherwise perfect stillness. Poirot remained quiet, deep in contemplation, while Hastings tried unsuccessfully to see through the swirling mist gathering at the road's edge. At last, the driver pointed ahead. "There, sirs. Winterfell Lodge." A grand structure rose out of the mist like something from an old tale, vast stone walls, turrets touched with snow, tall windows glinting faintly in the gloom. It stood upon a slope overlooking a dark lake, its surface frozen smooth as glass. "It looks rather forbidding," Hastings murmured. Poirot simply nodded. "My's OUI. A house that wears secrets well." The car pulled up before the entrance. Even before the doors opened, they sensed an atmosphere of tension hanging in the air, an uneasy stillness, a subtle heaviness, as though the house itself listened. Poirot stepped out, straightened his coat, and assessed the building with the sharp precision of a man reading a coded message. "Hastings," he said quietly, "I have a feeling that the little grey cells shall have much to occupy them here." And with that, Hercule Poirot ascended the steps of Winterfell Lodge, unaware that within its walls waited a mystery darker and more tangled than he, or Lady Evelyn, could yet imagine. Chapter 2: Winterfell's Uneasy Welcome. The heavy oak doors of Winterfell Lodge opened before Poirot could even lift a hand to knock. A draught of chilled air escaped the entrance hall, carrying with it the faint scent of old wood, lavender polish, and something else, an undercurrent of tension, as though the house itself exhaled with worry. Lady Evelyn Whitcombe descended the marble steps that led from the gallery above. She was tall, graceful, and composed, but her complexion was pale and her eyes shadowed by sleepless nights. A string of pearls trembled slightly at her throat as she approached. "Monsieur Poirot, thank goodness you have come." Her voice was calm, but the tremor beneath it betrayed her. Poirot bowed his head. "Lady Evelyn, it is my honor. I received your telegram and came at once. Captain Hastings accompanies me." Hastings offered a polite bow. Lady Evelyn acknowledged him with a faint smile that did not reach her eyes. "Please," she said, gesturing toward a set of double doors, "let us speak by the fire. Winterfell is a cold place in winter." As they stepped into the grand drawing room, Poirot paused to take in the surroundings. The room was elegant, deep red curtains, polished wooden floors laid in a perfect herringbone pattern, a collection of ancestral portraits observing from the walls. Yet something was off. A vase on a side table stood at a crooked angle. A fire poker lay on the hearth as though hastily dropped. A window latch protruded slightly open despite the cold. Disorder in a house that otherwise whispered meticulous refinement. Lady Evelyn noticed his glance. "You see it, don't you? Everything is wrong nowadays." Poirot nodded slowly. "If you would tell me everything from the beginning, madam." Before she could speak, footsteps approached. A man entered, a tall, imposing figure with a silver moustache and stern eyes. He walked with a cane he seemed not to need. "My husband's cousin, Colonel Arthur Whitcombe," Lady Evelyn introduced. The colonel extended a stiff hand. "Mr. Poirot. I hope you haven't been summoned here for nonsense." Poirot's brows lifted politely. "I never assume nonsense, Colonel. Especially when fear is so clearly present." The colonel harumphed, shifting his weight as though bristling beneath invisible criticism. "You'll find this house full of nerves. Evelyn jumps at shadows. I keep telling her there is no need to drag detectives across the country." Lady Evelyn's lips tightened. "Arthur, please." "It is quite all right," Poirot said gently. "Conflict often precedes clarity." Before the exchange could deepen, a new voice emerged from the doorway. "If Lady Evelyn fears for her safety, Colonel, then nothing is nonsense." The speaker was a woman in her 40s, dressed in a sensible skirt and cardigan, her dark hair pinned neatly. Her eyes were sharp and observant. "Dr. Serena Vale," Lady Evelyn said. "Our family physician." Dr. Vale offered a courteous nod. "Mr. Poirot, Captain Hastings. Welcome to Winterfell." I advised Lady Evelyn that outside assistance might bring perspective. The colonel gave an irritated grunt. "Perspective? What we need is calm, not more meddling." Poirot merely inclined his head. "The more viewpoints, Colonel, the clearer the picture becomes." Behind Dr. Vale, another figure hovered, Miles Harrow, the estate steward. Lean, severe, and carrying an expression of perpetual disapproval, he stepped into the room with the quiet precision of someone used to moving unseen. "Shall I bring tea, my lady?" he asked. "Yes, thank you, Miles," Lady Evelyn said. "And please have someone prepare rooms for Mr. Poirot and Captain Hastings." "As you wish, madam." Harrow bowed slightly and vanished as silently as he'd appeared. When they were again alone, Lady Evelyn gestured to the sofa. "Please sit. It is time I explain." Poirot and Hastings settled into their seats. The fire crackled softly, casting warm light that did not quite drive away the room's heavy mood. Lady Evelyn folded her hands tightly. For months now, the house has been unsettled. First, small things, doors left open, papers moved, objects misplaced. I assumed it was forgetfulness. But then, 3 weeks ago, my room was ransacked. Drawers overturned, personal letters taken. "Any signs of forced entry?" Poirot asked. "None. The servants were all at supper. I was out visiting the village. When I returned, everything was as if someone had searched for something specific." Hastings leaned forward. "And last night's incident?" Lady Evelyn shuddered slightly. "A stone, so I thought, came through my window. The glass shattered. But when we looked outside, the snow beneath the window was untouched. No footprints. No sign of anyone at all." Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. "And the glass, Lady Evelyn, had it fallen inward or outward?" She blinked, startled by the question. "Outward, if I recall correctly. A few pieces inside, but most beneath the window." Poirot nodded slowly. Continue, madam. 2 nights before that, I awoke to the sound of footsteps in my room. Soft but unmistakable. When I lit the lamp, no one was there. The window was closed, the door was locked from the inside. Hastings exhaled. Good Lord. Poirot steepled his fingers. Lady Evelyn, why do you fear that something dreadful will soon occur? She hesitated. Because I believe these are warnings. From whom? That, she whispered, I do not know. Before Poirot could probe further, the door opened slightly and a young woman stepped in, her expression curious and apologetic at once. She was in her early 20s, with lively eyes and a bright, engaging manner that seemed out of place in the gloomy house. Oh, Lady Evelyn, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's quite all right, Lady Evelyn said. Mr. Poirot, this is Clara Whitcombe, Arthur's cousin. Clara, these are our guests. Clara gave a warm smile. I've heard of you, Mr. Poirot. The detective who sees everything. Poirot inclined his head modestly. Only the details, mademoiselle. They speak when others are silent. Clara's expression flickered, nervous, thoughtful, something unspoken. Well, she said lightly, I hope the house doesn't scare you off before you've even unpacked. Winterfell can be unsettling. Poirot watched her carefully. She looked away too quickly. Lady Evelyn rose. Come, Monsieur Poirot. I will show you my room, the scene of last night's disturbance. As they followed her through the corridor, Poirot observed the house's atmosphere more closely. The long hallway was lined with portraits, but several hung at a crooked angle. A rug was slightly rumpled. A clock on a table had stopped at 9 minutes past 3. Signs of disorder everywhere, but deliberately subtle, as though someone wished to mimic chaos without committing fully to it. Lady Evelyn opened her bedroom door with a trembling hand. This is where it happened. Poirot stepped inside. The room was elegant yet faintly disarrayed. On the carpet beneath the window, carefully preserved, lay shards of glass scattered in a strangely inconsistent pattern. A cold draught seeped from the edges of the window. Poirot knelt, examining the glass with meticulous care. He held up one fragment, turning it between gloved fingers. Ah, he murmured softly. Très intéressant. What is it? Hastings asked. Poirot did not answer directly. Instead, he rose and inspected the curtains, the latch, the sill, and the barely visible marks on the wooden floor. Then he turned to Lady Evelyn. Madam, someone wishes to convince you that danger approaches, he said quietly. But the true danger, I think, already walks these corridors. Lady Evelyn paled. You mean, someone inside the house? Poirot looked around the room once more, then back at her. I believe, Lady Evelyn, he said gravely, that Winterfell Lodge has become a stage. And someone, very clever, very patient, is arranging the scenes. His eyes sharpened. And that someone is not working from outside, but from within. Chapter 3 Emotives in the Lamplight. The household gathered for dinner that evening, but the atmosphere was far from convivial. The long mahogany table stretched nearly the length of the dining room, illuminated by a pair of crystal chandeliers whose light glittered across polished silver and fine bone china. Yet despite the elegance, there was a palpable tension in the air, like a taut string ready to snap. Poirot and Hastings were seated midway along the table, with Lady Evelyn at the head. Colonel Arthur Whitcombe sat to her right, carving roast pheasant with unnecessary force. Clara Whitcombe was on the opposite side, her thoughtful gaze drifting between Poirot and her relatives. Dr. Serena Vale occupied a place near the far end, her posture straight, her demeanour calm but watchful. Miles Harrow, the steward, oversaw the serving with silent precision. He did not speak unless addressed, and even then, only in the briefest of sentences. Conversation was faint and hesitant at first. "It is fortunate you arrived before the storm worsened," Lady Evelyn said after a moment. "The roads can be treacherous this time of year." Poirot nodded. "The snow lends the landscape a certain beauty, but also isolation, does it not?" Clara gave a soft laugh. "Isolation is the first thing one notices about Winterfell. The house doesn't like to be disturbed." Colonel Whitcombe grunted. "Nonsense, Clara. You speak as though the place is haunted." Clara's smile faltered. "I didn't mean it literally, Arthur. Even figuratively, it is nonsense," the colonel muttered, stabbing at his vegetables. "We are letting imaginations run wild." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You do not believe anything unusual is happening, Colonel?" The colonel set down his fork with a clatter. "I believe Evelyn is strained by grief, that is all. After Henry's death she has been unsettled. That is why her nerves betray her." Lady Evelyn's lips tightened, and she glanced briefly at Dr. Vale. Poirot noticed. "Lady Evelyn's concerns do not appear exaggerated to me," he said gently. "But grief, it seems, is a topic that looms large here. Perhaps it touches more than one person in this household." His gaze fell deliberately on several faces. Dr. Vale's expression remained composed, but Clara looked down at her plate. Harrow paused momentarily where he stood, then continued pouring wine. It was a quiet but telling reaction. After dinner, the group retired to the drawing room, where a fire had been rekindled. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls, lending the room a flickering, uneasy glow. Colonel Whitcombe settled into his favorite armchair with a pipe, filling the air with a pungent aroma of tobacco. Dr. Vale chose a seat near the window, as though needing the cool air from the slightly ajar pane. Clara sat on a low stool near the fire, hugging her knees in thought. Lady Evelyn remained standing for a moment, fingers trailing lightly across the back of a chair before she sank into it with a soft sigh. Miles Harrow stood at attention by the door, waiting for any instructions. Poirot, sensing a moment ripe for inquiry, rose. "Mesdames et messieurs, if you will indulge me, I should like to ask a few questions. Informal ones." Colonel Whitcombe groaned. "Must we begin interrogations already?" Poirot smiled pleasantly. "It is not interrogation, Colonel. It is exploration." He turned first to Lady Evelyn. "Madam, you have experienced several disturbances. Has anything like this ever occurred in Winterfell before?" She shook her head. "Never. Not even during the war, when tension hung everywhere. This house has always been a place of serenity until recently. And the disturbances began after your husband's death." Her eyes flickered. "Yes, shortly after." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, then shifted his attention to the colonel. "Colonel Whitcombe, forgive me if I am blunt. You do not believe these incidents to be deliberate acts. Yet you also mentioned that Lady Evelyn has been under strain. Do you yourself feel the house is completely safe?" The colonel hesitated, not long, but enough for Poirot to catch it, before saying, "I have seen nothing to alarm me." "But have you heard nothing?" Poirot countered. "Footsteps at night? Doors moving?" "No," the colonel said firmly. "And even if I had, old houses are full of creaks and sighs. Evelyn imagines things." Dr. Vale's gaze sharpened. "Arthur, Evelyn is not imagining everything. I myself have heard unusual noises during late rounds." The colonel turned sharply. "You never told me that." "You never asked," Dr. Vale replied evenly. Poirot interjected gently. "Dr. Vale, you seem to possess a balanced view of events here. Might I inquire whether you have your own concerns?" She paused. "Winterfell is tense, Mr. Poirot. Grief changes people. And Henry's death, well, it left deeper marks than perhaps any of us admit. Clara looked up suddenly, as though impulsively drawn into the conversation. Mr. Poirot, did Evelyn tell you everything? About the accident, I mean. Lady Evelyn stiffened. Clara. No, Clara insisted softly. She deserves to know. Everyone deserves the truth. Poirot leaned forward slightly. Please, mademoiselle. Continue. Clara swallowed, her hands tightening around each other. Henry died on the lake. He was warned about thin ice, everyone warned him. But he insisted on crossing it alone. The ice cracked and he fell through. It was horrible. Poirot nodded sympathetically. You were close to him. She hesitated. Not particularly. But his death affected all of us in different ways. Lady Evelyn whispered, Clara, we agreed. That silence would help nothing. Clara finished quietly. You were wrong. Poirot observed the exchange keenly. Another thread of tension. Another hint of something withheld. As you see, Mr. Poirot, the Colonel said brusquely, Winterfell is full of emotion these days. Evelyn's telegram was unnecessary. Poirot gave him a mild smile. Colonel, I have rarely been summoned to a household where emotions are not heightened. It is the nature of human behavior that truth makes itself known under pressure. He crossed the room to the fireplace, admiring the ornate ironwork. Tell me, he said, turning back to the group, has anyone else experienced intrusion? Items missing, disturbed, or out of place? Silence. Then Clara said, my sketchbook vanished last week. I thought I had misplaced it. Harrow spoke unexpectedly from the doorway. Several tools from the utility cupboard were moved. No one claimed it. The Colonel frowned. And why didn't you mention that? Harrow bowed slightly. Because you said not to trouble you with minutiae. Poirot watched the Colonel's jaw tighten. My apologies, the Colonel muttered, though it lacked sincerity. For a few moments, the fire crackled as everyone absorbed the implications. Poirot felt the tension shifting, subtly, but undeniably. Lady Evelyn finally broke the silence. Mr. Poirot, what do you think is happening? Poirot smiled gently. At this moment, madam, I think only this, someone is attempting not merely to frighten you, but to send a message. And such messages are rarely written without motive. He glanced around the room, observing each face in turn. And I believe, Miss Amos, that within this very room lies at least one person who knows far more than they have yet said. His words settled like a quiet storm. No one spoke. No one moved. But Poirot noticed it, the flicker of fear in one pair of eyes, the twitch of guilt in another, the tightening of a throat in a third. The house was full of secrets. And at least one of them was dangerous. Chapter 4, A Cry in the Night. The night at Winterfell Lodge was still and heavy, as though the house itself was holding its breath. Snow lay thick upon the grounds, muffling every footstep, every whispered sound. Inside, the halls were quiet except for the occasional creak of the ancient floorboards, or the soft ticking of a grandfather clock somewhere in the house. Poirot, meticulous as ever, had retired early to his guest room. He slept lightly, his mind already weaving together threads of observation from the day's interviews. Hastings, sleeping in the adjoining room, snored gently. Poirot, alert to the slightest irregularity, was roused from a light doze by a sound that seemed almost imperceptible at first, a sharp, piercing cry. He leapt from his bed, slippers barely touching the floor, and grabbed his walking stick. Hastings, he called. Wake, mon ami. Hastings, still groggy, opened one eye. Poirot? What on earth? There is disturbance. Poirot said tersely, already moving toward the door. Let us be swift." The cry had come from Lady Evelyn's sitting room. The corridor leading there was dimly lit by sconces, shadows leaping with the flicker of flames from the fireplace below. Poirot moved silently, Hastings following as best he could. Every detail, the direction of the shadows, the tilt of the picture frames along the corridor, the faint scuff of slippers against the carpet, was noted. When they reached the sitting room, the scene confirmed Poirot's fears. Lady Evelyn stood trembling beside her writing desk, pale and shaken. Papers were scattered across the floor as if a small storm had passed through the room. Someone has taken my letters again," she cried, voice quivering. "They were all here this morning, and now, gone." Poirot knelt, inspecting the floor with the precision of a man performing surgery. "None, madam, not all is lost. Observe." He held a sheet of paper with a faint fingerprint smudge. "One letter remains, touched but not removed. Someone wished you to see evidence of intrusion, but not all, yes. A message is being sent." Hastings looked around helplessly. "But the window? There's no sign of anyone outside. Look at the snow, it hasn't been disturbed at all." Poirot stood and examined the window carefully. The latch had been raised slightly. Frost clung to the edges. Yet, indeed, no footprints marred the snow beneath. Poirot held up a hand. "Ah, Hastings, that is precisely what draws my attention. The intruder has made it appear as though they came from outside, yet the absence of tracks tells the truth. The intruder did not climb the window at all." Lady Evelyn clutched a chair for support. Then how did they enter?" Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Ah, that, madam, is the art of a patient mind. They entered from inside the house. Perhaps through a side passage, perhaps through a service corridor. They understand this house as well as, or better than, anyone living here." He stood and walked around the room, noting the angle of the scattered papers, the slight displacement of the desk chair, and the faint smear of dirt near the baseboard. "See here, subtle traces. The intruder moved carefully, deliberately. Nothing was done in haste, yet the scene is intended to alarm. That is why certain objects are left in place, letters, papers, even shards of glass from the shattered window. They are clues, yes, but false clues, carefully arranged." Hastings frowned. "So this is a warning, but why?" Poirot sighed softly. "Ah, Hastings, that is the question. Warning or misdirection? Perhaps both. The human heart is curious. It desires to frighten, to provoke, and to protect, all at once. And the clever human, more dangerous than any ordinary criminal, will weave these intentions into one tapestry." Lady Evelyn's hands trembled as she picked up the remaining letter. "Do you think they are targeting me? Or is it someone seeking revenge for Henry?" Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. "Madam, it is too soon to be certain. What is clear is this: someone wishes you to feel guilt, to feel fear, to believe that your past is not as private as you thought. And that person is close. Very close." Hastings ran a hand through his hair. "Close, like inside the house? But everyone is accounted for." Poirot smiled faintly, but without warmth. "Accounted for does not mean innocent, Hastings. And even the most careful servants or family members may hide thoughts more dangerous than any intruder outside." The room was silent except for the soft crackle of the fire and the wind rattling the window panes. Lady Evelyn sank into a chair, trembling. Poirot motioned for Hastings to stand with him. "Now, mon ami, observe the subtleties." He pointed to the desk. The left-hand drawer is slightly misaligned. Not forced. No sign of violence. Just pushed carefully outward to create a gap. Hastings leaned closer. to give the impression someone rifled through it. Exactment. And the contents removed are selective, precise. Notice, the drawer is missing no writing implements, no small trinkets, only letters. Poirot knelt again, picking up a fragment of paper that had been torn from an envelope. He held it up, tilting it under the firelight. A single thread clung to its edge, fine wool, slightly frayed. And here, we see the intruder has left a mark, unintentional perhaps, but revealing nonetheless. Hastings peered over his shoulder. A thread? Yes. Not from anyone we have observed thus far. The colour and weave suggest a coat of a particular make, one commonly worn by someone of Dr. Vale's standing, or, indeed, anyone careful but not cautious in every regard. But notice the smudge here. Poirot touched the glass with a gloved finger. Hazel ointment, often applied to hands. A small detail, yet distinctive. Lady Evelyn gasped softly. You can tell all that from a fragment. Poirot's moustaches twitched. Ah, madam, it is all in the little things. The little grey cells see what the eyes almost miss. Footsteps, threads, smudges, they speak to me in ways words never can. Hastings, clearly impressed, shook his head. I never cease to be amazed, Poirot. Even in a room full of chaos, you find a story. Poirot stood and gestured toward the window once more. Observe the snow. Pristine. No footprints, no sign of struggle. This is not a clumsy attempt. It is a deliberate performance. And performances, Hastings, are intended to communicate. The intruder is saying, I am here. I know. I am patient. He turned to Lady Evelyn. Madam, you must not fear that this is a random act. It is not. It is carefully chosen, timed, and performed. Whoever does this knows the house, its inhabitants, and their routines intimately. And they are testing you. Lady Evelyn's eyes were wide. Testing me, if for what? Poirot shook his head slightly, his expression thoughtful. That is precisely what we must discover. But for now, it is enough to know that your fear is not imagined, that your distress is not folly. And that the intruder's patience is both a weapon and a mistake. The smallest clue, thread, smudge, angle, betrays them. Hastings glanced around the room once more, eyes wide at the scattered letters. So, someone is inside, moving silently, frightening her, taking what they wish, and leaving only enough evidence to taunt us. Hastings, Poirot said, his voice low and precise. And tonight, they have revealed themselves by absence, by silence, and by the very order they pretend to disrupt. The game begins, and we must watch carefully. Every detail, no matter how insignificant, may prove crucial. Lady Evelyn, trembling but resolute, set the remaining letter on the desk. Then you will stay, you will find out who is doing this. Poirot inclined his head. Madam, I shall observe, I shall listen, and I shall deduce. Fear not. The little grey cells are already at work. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes, but inside the sitting room, Poirot's calm presence seemed to cast a small circle of order over the chaos. He knelt once more, picking up another paper fragment, turning it in the firelight. Now, Hastings, he whispered, we wait. And we watch. For the intruder is clever, yes, but every cleverness leaves a trail. And we, Miss Amis, shall follow it to the heart of the matter. And with that, the three of them, Poirot, Hastings, and Lady Evelyn, stood in the dimly lit room, listening to the house that had become both stage and silent witness, knowing that the first truly revealing clue might come at any moment in the night. Chapter 5, Shadows of the Past. The morning after the unsettling events in Lady Evelyn's sitting room dawned cold and grey. A thin layer of frost coated the windows, glinting like fractured crystal in the weak winter sun. Poirot awoke early, as always, his mind already turning over the minutest details of the previous night. Hastings, in contrast, lay sprawled across his bed, still groggy, muttering complaints about the cold and the impossibility of sleep in a house so full of creaks and shadows. Poirot regarded him with gentle disapproval. Hastings, mon ami, one must learn to rest the body in order to awaken the little grey cells properly. Complaint served no purpose. Observation, yes. Complaint, none. Hastings grumbled but stirred anyway, the memory of last night's terror still vivid. Together, they dressed and made their way to the breakfast room, which was brightened by large windows overlooking the snow-covered grounds. The table had been set with care, but tension permeated the room. Even Miles Harrow moved with unusual stiffness. Lady Evelyn was already present, sipping her tea, her hand still slightly trembling. Poirot noted the slight dark circles beneath her eyes, fatigue combined with fear. Colonel Whitcombe entered, brisk and upright, his expression carefully neutral. Dr. Serena Vale followed, composed as ever, while Clara Whitcombe lingered near the doorway, her gaze restless, as if measuring the room and its occupants. Poirot surveyed them all thoughtfully. Miss Amos, today we shall attempt to understand not merely the what, but the why. Each of us must speak freely and observe carefully. The conversation began cautiously, polite at first, as if testing waters that might conceal hidden currents. The colonel spoke of the weather, the estate, the state of the frozen lake. Poirot's eyes, however, were attentive not to words alone, but to gestures, glances, and the slightest inflections in tone. Colonel, Poirot began after a pause, you appear confident that nothing untoward has occurred. Yet Lady Evelyn has experienced repeated intrusions, and you yourself have been present at Winterfell for many years. Tell me, has anything in the past unsettled this house? The colonel stiffened. There are family disagreements from time to time. But nothing extraordinary. The death of Henry, that was tragedy enough. Do not try to dig old wounds, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot inclined his head. I do not seek wounds, Colonel. Only understanding. For every present disturbance, there is often a shadow of the past. Dr. Vale spoke softly. Henry Whitcombe's death affected more than just Lady Evelyn. It changed the atmosphere here. People behaved differently afterward. Old secrets resurfaced. Old resentments. Poirot's eyes lit with interest. OUI. And what of these secrets, Doctor? Dr. Vale hesitated. Some things are too painful to speak aloud. But one fact may be relevant, Henry Whitcombe had disputes over money, property, and matters of family pride. Certain members feared his decisions, others resented them. And one perhaps felt they had been wronged in ways that Henry himself would never acknowledge. Hastings frowned. You mean someone here might have had reason to act against him? Poirot tapped his fingers lightly. Perhaps. But motive alone does not make action. Opportunity, cunning, and circumstance are all required. And at present, the disturbances themselves are the key. The intruder is not acting out of immediate anger but rather, careful calculation. Before the conversation could progress further, a sudden commotion from the library drew their attention. Miles Harrow, normally silent, was sprawled across the floor, groaning. A small iron candlestick lay nearby, its edge dented. Hastings rushed to his side. Good heavens! What happened? Poirot knelt to examine Harrow carefully. A blow, but not fatal. Observe the position of the candlestick. The intruder meant to incapacitate, not kill. There is deliberation here. Very careful observation. Harrow, still dazed, murmured, I heard footsteps. Thought I saw a shadow, then something hit me from behind. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And yet, the room bears signs of disorder intended to suggest theft. Papers scattered, a drawer left slightly open. No valuables appear to have been removed. This is theatrics. The intruder wishes you to believe in chaos, but all is calculated. Lady Evelyn clutched her hands. So someone is still here, moving unseen, striking at people. "Ms. Ouy," Poirot said softly. "And notice this, Ms. Amis, the attack on Harrow is consistent with last night's messages. Designed to frighten, to confuse, and to distract attention from the true purpose." Hastings frowned. "And what is that purpose?" Poirot rose, holding the candlestick carefully. "Ah, Hastings, that is what we must discover. But first, we examine the evidence itself. Notice the smudge of ointment on the handle. Not Harrow's, nor Colonel's, nor Lady Evelyn's. Someone took precautions, but overlooked a detail. Such mistakes are often revealing." Clara spoke suddenly, her voice soft but insistent. "Mr. Poirot? Henry's death, it has never really been explained, has it?" Lady Evelyn's expression darkened. "Clara! You promised." Clara shook her head. "We cannot ignore the past. It shapes the present. Henry died on the frozen lake, after being warned about the thin ice. Yet he went anyway. Some of us believed it was an accident. Others, perhaps, suspected something more. And yet no one spoke." Poirot's eyes twinkled with understanding. "Ah, the seeds of suspicion are planted long before the first leaf falls. Very well, mademoiselle. Your honesty is appreciated. Indeed, the past never truly dies. It merely waits for the right moment to return." Lady Evelyn's lips quivered. "You believe someone is acting out of old grudges?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, pacing slowly. "Perhaps from a desire for revenge. Or perhaps from fear, fear that old secrets might be revealed, fear that injustices may come to light. The intruder is clever, patient, and meticulous. They manipulate what they understand best, human emotion." Hastings shook his head. "It sounds impossible. How can anyone be so cunning? And right here, under our noses." Poirot smiled faintly. "Ah, Hastings, the clever mind often hides in plain sight. The intruder need not move quickly. The intruder need only act subtly, with knowledge of every routine, every expectation. And in doing so, they create the illusion of danger without exposure." Poirot's gaze settled on each of the assembled household members in turn. Lady Evelyn, exhausted but vigilant; Colonel Whitcombe, defensive and proud; Dr. Vale, calm and measured; Clara, restless and bright-eyed; and even Miles Harrow, whose silence masked a watchful mind. Each was capable of fear. Each could conceal a thought. Each could be part of the puzzle, or a red herring. Poirot knelt again, examining the floor where Harrow had been struck. "See here. The small displacement of carpet fibers. Not random. A careful placement to direct attention elsewhere. This, Hastings, is artistry. Yet artistry always leaves traces, and we shall find them." Lady Evelyn's hand shook slightly as she asked, "Mr. Poirot, can this be stopped?" Poirot's expression softened. "Ouy, madam. Observation, patience, and reason will reveal the intruder. Fear may guide them now, but logic and careful deduction guide us. Every detail, every slip, every misstep will point the way." He stood, tapping his fingers together lightly. "Today we gather the pieces of the past, secrets, disputes, unspoken grievances, and compare them with what has occurred over these nights. It is in the intersection of past and present that the truth lies." Clara leaned forward. And then we will know who has been behind this. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Patience, mademoiselle. The game is still unfolding. But we are close. Very close. Shadows of the past have emerged, and tonight, perhaps, we shall see the first light on the true purpose behind them. The household remained tense, aware that each glance, each whispered movement, might reveal a secret, might betray guilt. Outside, the snow glimmered, unbroken, pristine, as if Winterfell itself was watching. And Poirot, calm and collected, already sensed that the path to truth was winding, but it would lead him to the intruder, whoever it might be, and reveal the darkness that had long lain hidden beneath Winterfell Lodge's frozen surface. Chapter 6: The Hidden Workshop. Night fell once more upon Winterfell Lodge, a blanket of darkness smothering the estate's snow-clad gardens. The wind howled outside like a restless spirit, rattling the windows and stirring the trees in eerie protest. Inside, the household moved cautiously, each footstep echoing against the vast corridors. The previous night's intrusions and Harrow's attack had left a palpable tension. No one spoke above a whisper, and each glance carried suspicion. Poirot, however, was unfazed. Sitting in his study with Hastings, he reviewed the sequence of events carefully, his keen eyes scanning the pages of notes he had made since arrival. Hastings, mon ami, he said, tapping his fingers lightly on the table, we are observing a most clever adversary. Every disturbance is deliberate. Every warning, meant to frighten, is also a message. But messages contain patterns. Patterns reveal motive. Hastings leaned back, rubbing his temples. I can see that. But we still have no idea who. We have threads, scraps, smudges, and subtle signs, but nothing concrete. Poirot's small, precise smile appeared. Ah, but mon ami, concrete need not always be obvious. It sometimes hides in the places one overlooks. The intruder's audacity is matched only by their care. And such care, I have observed, often leads to a single misstep. At that moment, a soft knock interrupted them. Miles Harrow entered, his expression grim yet respectful. Monsieur Poirot, there is something you should see. It was discovered while I inspected the eastern wing. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Lead the way. The eastern wing of Winterfell was seldom used. Once home to storage and old servant quarters, it had been left largely abandoned after a series of renovations. The floorboards creaked ominously as they walked, and shadows cast by the flickering candlelight danced along the walls. Poirot's sharp eyes noticed every detail, the slightly warped door frames, the faint scuff marks along the corridor, the dust that had been disturbed in a nearly imperceptible line leading to a wall near the far end. Harrow stopped before an inconspicuous panel. Here, he said, pressing a hand against the wood. With a faint click, the panel swung inward, revealing a narrow passage beyond. The smell of old wood and dust mingled with something faintly chemical, a tang that suggested long use yet secrecy. Poirot's moustache twitched. Ah, interesting. A secret passage. He stepped inside cautiously, candle in hand. The passage was narrow, lined with old wooden beams, and ended at a second door, reinforced with iron hinges. There was an air of meticulous planning about its concealment. Hidden rooms, secret corridors, Hastings whispered. It's like something out of a storybook. Poirot ignored him, focusing instead on the door. No, Hastings. It is very real. And within this room, I suspect, lies evidence of the intruder's intentions. He pushed the door open gently. The room beyond was small but organized with the precision of a craftsman. Shelves lined the walls, filled with papers, small tools, vials of chemicals, and several letters neatly bundled together. A desk, similar in style to those in Lady Evelyn's sitting room, was carefully arranged with papers, some marked, some crossed out. On the floor lay fragments of envelopes, threads of different colors, and, most significant, a partially burned letter with the edges blackened, the words still legible enough to read. Cannot fail. Winterfell must obey. Secrets must remain hidden. No one may interfere. Poirot carefully examined the room, moving from shelf to desk to floor, noting each fragment of evidence. Hastings, he said softly, observe the method here. Everything is deliberate. The intruder has left behind papers that are not random, they are clues, but also distractions. He wishes to imply haste or carelessness, yet the arrangement shows extreme care. There is artistry in this, and arrogance. Hastings glanced around nervously. And this workshop, it's been used recently. Poirot nodded, crouching to inspect a small footprint in the dust, almost imperceptible. OUI. Recent indeed. Footprint small, careful, and deliberate. The intruder does not wish to be observed, yet leaves a trail, enough for someone observant, someone patient, to follow. He turned to Harrow. Miles, you say you discovered this room today. Yes, sir, Harrow replied. I was inspecting the eastern wing after last night's attack. A loose panel? I noticed it only because the dust had been disturbed. Poirot examined the footprint again. OUI, that explains it. The intruder has become overconfident, Hastings. Even the most careful person cannot maintain perfection indefinitely. Small details betray them. He lifted a small vial from the shelf, examining its contents. See here. Substances for smoke or minor alarms, nothing lethal. The intruder is sending messages, not committing murder yet. That tells us something of the temperament. Patient, calculating, perhaps fearful of discovery, yet bold in intent. Hastings frowned. And the letters? Do they tell us anything about motive? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yes. The letters are fascinating. They are partial, incomplete, and yet suggest that the intruder seeks to protect a secret, one that may relate to Henry Whitcomb's death, or matters that predate even him. There is fear, Hastings, but also determination. Someone here believes they are enacting justice, or protecting the family's honor, or both. He paused, glancing at Harrow. Miles, have any servants been absent or behaving unusually these past weeks? Harrow shook his head. No, sir. All are accounted for, to my knowledge. Poirot's gaze returned to the shelves and desk. The intruder is clever, yes, but not infallible. Observe here, a fragment of the envelope, a small thread of wool, and these fingerprints smudged with ointment. They are minor, yes, almost inconsequential, but they point to someone very familiar with the house's routines, perhaps too familiar. He held up a small folded paper. And this is a map of the house, annotated. Secret corridors, points of access, locations of valuables, even rooms with heavy locks. The intruder has studied Winterfell for weeks, perhaps months. Very careful, very meticulous. Hastings shook his head. It's frightening to think someone could move around so freely and no one would notice. Poirot's small smile returned. My's OUI, Hastings. But even the cleverest make mistakes. The trick is to observe these mistakes, and then to deduce who stands to gain most from secrecy, fear, and confusion. And that, Miss Amos, is what we shall do. He placed the papers and vials back carefully, as though touching them too forcefully might destroy hidden meaning. Tonight, Poirot continued, we watch. We note. Every movement, every sound, every glance. The intruder will act again, for that is the nature of their design. And when they do, we shall be ready. Lady Evelyn, who had followed cautiously into the passage, whispered, will they strike again? Poirot's eyes softened. Perhaps. But fear not, madam. The intruder underestimates the patience and observation of the little grey cells. Soon their hand will be revealed, if not by force, then by detail. As they emerged from the hidden room, the snow outside seemed even more silent, the night more watchful. Winterfell Lodge, vast and full of shadows, had already begun to yield its secrets. And Poirot, his eyes bright with purpose, knew that they were on the verge of a breakthrough that would bring the invisible intruder into the light. Chapter 7: The Boldest Move. The evening air at Winterfell Lodge was bitter, the wind shrieking along the eaves like a chorus of unseen voices. Inside, the household was quieter than usual. Even the servants moved with an unusual caution, their steps measured, as though the house itself demanded vigilance. Poirot, however, was unshaken. He had spent the day reviewing the evidence from the hidden workshop in the eastern wing, piecing together fragments of paper, threads, and smudges into a careful mental map of the intruder's movements. Hastings, pacing nervously in the sitting room, muttered, "I don't like this, Poirot. The intruder is becoming more daring. Last night, a simple scare. Tonight, I feel something worse is about to happen." Poirot, polishing his small pocket notebook, looked up with a faint smile. "Ah, Hastings, you forget the value of patience. One cannot simply leap at conclusions. The clever mind, our intruder, will act with precision, yes. But precision leaves patterns. It is these patterns that reveal intention. And intention, Hastings, reveals identity." Before Hastings could respond, Lady Evelyn entered, her face pale and drawn. "Monsieur Poirot? Clara has gone missing. I cannot find her anywhere." Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Gone missing?" He rose swiftly, motioning for Hastings to follow. "When was she last seen?" "Just before dinner," Lady Evelyn replied. "She said she wished to look for some old books in the library. But the library door is closed, and Miles says no one has entered." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Ah, a curious timing. A disappearance during a house under siege of subtle disturbances. Hastings, we must act quickly. There is little time for delay." They moved through the corridors, Poirot noting every detail, the uneven floorboards, the faint scuff marks, the subtle draught seeping from a window slightly ajar in the long corridor leading to the library. Poirot knelt, inspecting the dust along the floor. "Observe, Hastings. Recent footsteps, yes, but only one. Clara was guided deliberately, perhaps even coerced, along a path intended to mislead any observer. The intruder is bold. Boldness often precedes desperation." Hastings shivered. "Do you think she's been harmed?" Poirot's gaze was steady. "Not yet. The intruder is clever. The goal is not injury, but influence, fear, distraction, compliance. And sometimes, mon ami, the boldest moves are made to expose others." They reached the library door, which was slightly cracked. Poirot pushed it open gently, candle in hand. Inside, the room appeared undisturbed at first glance. Rows of shelves stood solemnly, and the heavy curtains were drawn tight against the winter chill. Yet Poirot's keen eye immediately noticed a small detail, a faint trail of disrupted dust leading behind a large armchair near the fireplace. "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "look here. Someone has moved recently. The intruder is hiding behind this chair. And Clara," he paused, scanning the shadows. "May be nearby, perhaps frightened, but unharmed." Carefully, Poirot approached the chair, lifting the candle higher. There, huddled and trembling, was Clara Whitcombe. Her bright eyes shone with fear, but relief washed over her face when she saw Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot." "Thank goodness," she whispered. I thought someone would take me away forever." Poirot knelt beside her. Mademoiselle, calm yourself. We must speak quietly. Tell me, were you lured here? Clara nodded. Yes. I found a letter slipped under my door. It said I should come to the library if I wished to understand the truth. I followed it. And then someone moved the shelves, and I couldn't see. I was so frightened. Poirot examined the letter. The handwriting was deliberate, neat, yet lacked the flourish of genuine correspondence. Ah, we see the hand of a patient planner, Hastings. They know how to instill fear without harming. At that moment, the room was illuminated by a sudden flare, perhaps from the fireplace, or perhaps intentionally, a shadow moving near the far shelves caught Poirot's eye. Hastings, the intruder! A figure darted across the room, swift and agile. Poirot did not chase immediately. Instead, he observed the pattern of the movement, noting every detail, the shoes scuffed slightly, a thread of wool dangling from a sleeve, the subtle, deliberate pacing. The intruder moved toward a hidden section of the library, where a false panel covered a small alcove. Poirot whispered, "Hastings, watch carefully. Every step, every glance, it is a performance, yes, but it is also a mistake. Boldness can be revealing." The intruder reached the hidden alcove and paused, attempting to slip a small bundle inside. Poirot acted swiftly, raising his voice with precision. "Ah! But we have observed your cleverness, monsieur or madame." Startled, the intruder turned. Poirot advanced slowly, hands raised in calm authority. Hastings followed, ready but hesitant. The figure froze, and in that moment, a small slip occurred, a thread of the wool from their sleeve caught on the edge of the alcove, unraveling slightly. Poirot's keen eyes narrowed. "Ah, a detail, Miss Amos, but a telling one. One cannot be perfect in haste. You see, the boldest actions often reveal the most subtle secrets." The intruder hesitated, realizing escape was now impossible. Poirot took a step forward. "Reveal yourself. There is no need for further tricks. Your aim is clear, your identity, soon, will be revealed." Slowly, the intruder stepped into the light. To the surprise of all, it was not a servant or a distant cousin, but Dr. Serena Vale herself. Her face was pale, yet calm, betraying a resolve that chilled the room more than any shadow could. Lady Evelyn gasped. "Dr. Vale! But why?" Poirot's gaze was unwavering. "Madam, the clever mind does not always act out of malice alone. Sometimes it acts out of fear, sometimes loyalty, misguided though it may be, and sometimes the desire to protect secrets that the heart fears will harm those they love." Dr. Vale's hands trembled slightly. "You don't understand. I was protecting them, all of them. Winterfell has secrets that must not be revealed. Henry's death, and what came after. If certain truths were known, the family would be destroyed." Poirot nodded slowly. "Ah, yes, the mixture of fear and care. You chose the path of shadows to preserve what you believed was good. But in doing so, you created chaos and fear. Observe, Miss Amos, intentions, however pure, cannot justify actions that terrorize others." Hastings muttered under his breath, "I never would have guessed. Dr. Vale. So careful, so composed, and yet." Poirot gave a small, wry smile. "Precisely, Hastings. The cleverest often hide in plain sight. And the boldest moves, such as luring Clara here, reveal more than they intend." Clara, still trembling, looked from Dr. Vale to Poirot. "But why?" "Why me?" "To test," Poirot said softly. "To see whether you might uncover what you were not meant to know. And to ensure that no mistake would reveal the full truth prematurely. Yet, even the cleverest must bow to observation and reason. Dr. Vale sank into a chair, exhaustion and resignation overtaking her. I only wish to protect Winterfell. Poirot's moustache twitched. And yet, the little grey cells show us the truth. Protection, fear, secrecy, they can never justify terror. But now, at last, the first real revelation has come to light. And with it, the path to understanding all disturbances, all intrusions, becomes clear. The room fell silent, the storm outside continuing its howl. Yet within Winterfell Lodge, for the first time, a sense of order began to replace fear. Poirot's small, precise eyes had observed the boldest move, and the final pieces of the puzzle were poised to fall into place. Chapter 8: The Grand Solution. Winterfell Lodge was unusually still that morning. The storm outside had subsided, leaving a soft, undisturbed blanket of snow that glittered in the pale winter sun. Inside, the household gathered in the sitting room, eyes tense, breaths measured. Dr. Serena Vale sat quietly, her expression subdued, while Clara Whitcombe remained close to Lady Evelyn, still shaken but relieved. Even Colonel Whitcombe, usually bristling with pride, was quiet, his jaw tight and uneasy. Poirot, standing by the fireplace, appeared perfectly at ease, his hands folded neatly behind him. His moustaches twitched slightly, the only visible sign of his excitement. The little grey cells had worked tirelessly through the night, connecting threads of observation, motive, and opportunity. Now, at last, he was ready to reveal the truth. Miss Amos, Poirot began, his voice calm yet commanding, these past days have been fraught with fear and uncertainty. Intrusions, letters, shadows, each carefully orchestrated. And yet, as always, the truth lies not in the grand gestures but in the smallest details. Footprints, threads, smudges, and misaligned drawers speak louder than cries and whispers. And from these details, the identity of the intruder and the motive behind the disturbances become clear. He paused, letting his words settle over the room. First, let us consider the hidden workshop in the eastern wing. Only someone with intimate knowledge of Winterfell could have used it undetected. The intruder's movements, the careful placement of items, the selective removal of letters, all indicate a mind familiar with the house's routines and secret passages. Hastings shifted in his seat. So Dr. Vale, it was you? I still can't believe it. Poirot nodded slightly. Oh, Hastings. Dr. Vale's cleverness was evident. Calm, composed, observant, yet not infallible. The small mistakes, the thread caught on the alcove, the faint smudge of ointment, the overlooked dust trail, revealed her presence. But let us turn to motive, for that is equally crucial. Lady Evelyn's fingers twitched nervously. Motive? Poirot's eyes met hers. Madam, your late husband, Henry Whitcombe, left certain matters unresolved. Disputes over property, disagreements over family decisions, and secrets related to events before his death. Dr. Vale, in her devotion, sought to protect the family from harm and scandal. She feared that revealing these truths would destroy Winterfell and the family's reputation. But in attempting to protect, she created fear, confusion, and danger. Clara spoke up, her voice still trembling. But why involve me? Why lure me to the library? Poirot turned his gaze to her. Ah, mademoiselle, that was the boldest move, yes. Dr. Vale wished to test whether you might discover truths you were not meant to see. It was a trial, one to gauge reactions, to prevent a greater revelation. But bold moves, as I have said, often reveal the most subtle errors. In luring you, she left a trail, small footprints, a displaced dust pattern, that betrayed her. Dr. Vale's hands rested in her lap, trembling. I only wanted to prevent mistakes. To keep the family safe. Poirot's voice softened, but remained firm. Intentions, however noble, cannot justify acts that terrify or endanger others. Protection through secrecy is not the same as protection through transparency. You miscalculated the human element, the fear, the curiosity, the reactions. It is for this that chaos unfolded. Colonel Whitcombe broke the silence. So, all the disturbances, the intrusions, the stolen letters, it was you? And for what? Some noble cause. Poirot gave a small smile. Yes, Colonel. Every disturbance, every letter removed or partially left behind, was deliberate. Dr. Vale wished to control the narrative, to prevent accidental discovery of old secrets. Her methods were theatrical, designed to frighten, but meticulous. She relied on her knowledge of Winterfell and the careful orchestration of events to achieve her goals. And yet, even the cleverest cannot escape the little grey cells. Hastings shook his head, incredulous. It's incredible, and terrifying. Someone so trusted, so calm, could manipulate everyone and move unseen. Poirot twitched his moustaches. Precisely, Hastings. That is why observation is so crucial. One must notice the small details, the seemingly insignificant clues, and not be distracted by fear or misdirection. Observe the fragments of envelopes, the subtle misalignment of drawers, the thread of wool, all spoke to knowledge, familiarity, and care. And from these small details, the whole picture emerged. Lady Evelyn, still pale, finally spoke. And the letters, the hidden workshop, the repeated disturbances, all meant to protect us. Poirot nodded. "Oh, madam. Protection, yes. But protection through fear is not true protection. It is the risk of creating harm while attempting to prevent it. And that, unfortunately, was the danger Dr. Vale's actions introduced." Clara, still clutching Lady Evelyn's hand, asked softly, "But why now? Why act so boldly in the last few nights?" Poirot's eyes gleamed with precision. Because the house was changing, the dynamics shifting. Each day brought the possibility of accidental discovery. Boldness was necessary to test the household, to ensure control, to prevent a mistake. Yet boldness always risks exposure, as we have seen. He moved slowly around the room, his hands behind his back. "I scanning each face. Notice, Miss Amis, that even the boldest actions betray psychological patterns. Fear mixed with loyalty, secrecy mixed with care. The intruder does not act out of malice, but out of devotion, misguided though it may be. And yet, all actions must be measured against the principles of safety and morality." Dr. Vale's voice was quiet. "I see that now. I should have trusted others more, explained more." Poirot inclined his head. "Oh, doctor. Understanding comes with reflection. And now, the truth is revealed. Winterfell's disturbances were not random, not criminal in the usual sense, but orchestrated to maintain control and prevent exposure of secrets. The intruder, brave and clever, made one error too many, the human element, the small overlooked details, that allowed the solution to emerge. Hastings, still in disbelief, muttered, "So it was not Henry's death, not a new enemy, not some distant relative, it was right here, all along." Poirot's small smile broadened slightly. "Exactly, Hastings. Often, the greatest dangers lie not outside, but within. And it is the task of the detective, the little grey cells, to separate fear from fact, observation from speculation. And today, Miss Amis, we have done so." Lady Evelyn, her hand still clasping Clara's, said softly, "So, we are safe now." Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Oh, madam. The intruder has been identified. The intentions revealed. And from this moment, the household may begin to heal, to restore trust and order. Yet one must remember, vigilance is always necessary. For cleverness, even with good intent, can create shadows where none should exist. Dr. Vale bowed slightly, whispered, "I understand, Monsieur Poirot. I acted out of devotion and misjudgment. I see that now." Poirot's expression softened. "An understanding is the first step toward reconciliation. Let this be a lesson that truth, clarity, and courage must guide action, even when protecting those we love." The room was silent for a long moment, the snow outside reflecting pale light through the windows. Winterfell Lodge, once shrouded in fear and uncertainty, now felt lighter, more ordered. The intruder had been revealed, the motives laid bare, and the threads of mystery neatly woven into understanding. Hastings broke the silence finally, a note of relief in his voice. "Well, Poirot, once again, your little grey cells have triumphed." Poirot twitched his moustaches, a satisfied smile on his lips. "Ah, Hastings, it is not triumph. It is order restored, clarity achieved, and reason applied. That, in the end, is the true victory of the detective." Lady Evelyn, looking around the room at her household, said softly, "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. You have given us not only the truth, but also peace." Poirot bowed slightly. "Peace, madam, is always the reward of truth properly observed. And Winterfell, now, may finally sleep quietly, knowing that fear has been replaced by understanding. And that, Miss Amos, is all any detective, or any household, can hope to achieve." The storm outside had passed completely, leaving a clear, frozen morning. Winterfell Lodge, once a house of shadows, had emerged into light. And Hercule Poirot, ever meticulous, ever patient, had once again demonstrated the power of observation, reason, and the little grey cells.